30 years old, iced oat milk latte in one hand, phone in the other, scrolling past a woman in Kansas City who just put a down payment on a 4-bedroom house. She is sitting in her 600-square-foot apartment in a city where the rent alone could be a mortgage somewhere else, wondering why she works harder than almost anyone she knows and still feels broke. She is not lazy. She is not bad with money. She budgets. She has a savings app. She even watches the finance videos, takes the notes, tries the 50-30-20 rule. And still, every single month, her bank account tells a story that does not match her effort. Here is the truth nobody wants to say out loud. Sometimes the problem is not her spending. Sometimes the problem is her zip code.
We do not talk about this enough.
We talk about budgeting, about girl math, about cutting back on lattes, as if the entire system is fair and the only variable is discipline. But your city is not a neutral backdrop to your financial life. It is an active participant in it. It decides what percentage of your income disappears before you even open your first paycheck. It decides how far your salary stretches, how fast your savings grow, and whether your 20s and 30s are spent building a foundation or just staying afloat. This is the conversation about where women should actually live if building wealth is the goal, not just surviving in style. Let's start with a number that should be taught in every high school in America. The average American spends roughly a third of their income on housing. In cities like New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, or Miami, that number often creeps toward 40, 50, sometimes 60% for renters trying to live somewhere that does not require 3 roommates. That means before groceries, before your skincare routine, before your gym membership, before a single dollar goes toward investing, half your income is already gone. You are not failing at money. You are financing your address. And this is where it gets emotionally complicated because for a lot of women, the city is not just a place to live. It is an identity. It is proof that you made it. There is a quiet, unspoken pressure that says if you are ambitious, if you are successful, if you are that girl, you're supposed to be somewhere expensive, somewhere with a skyline, somewhere people recognize from 100 aesthetic reels. Nobody posts a soft, glowing morning routine video captioned, "I live in a mid-sized city with a lower cost of living, and my net worth is quietly climbing." It does not have the same visual appeal. But financially, it might be the smarter flex. Clock it. The girl with the expensive apartment and the girl with the growing investment portfolio are not always the same girl. Sometimes they are opposites. Let's slow down and really sit inside a scenario because numbers alone do not move people. Stories do. Imagine 2 women, both 28, both earning $72,000 a year, both working in marketing. One lives in a major coastal city. Her rent for a modest 1-bedroom is $2,800 a month. After taxes, rent, utilities, transportation, and the unavoidable cost of simply existing in a city where a sandwich is $16, she has maybe $200 left to put towards saving some months, and other months, nothing at all. Her emergency fund has been in progress for 3 years. The other woman lives in a growing mid-sized city in the Midwest or the South, somewhere with a real downtown, good restaurants, a rising creative scene, but without the coastal price tag. Her rent for a comparable 1-bedroom is $1,100 a month. Same salary, same job title, but she is investing $600 a month into a retirement account and a brokerage account. She has 3 months of expenses saved and she still goes out on weekends, still gets her nails done, still lives what most people would call a genuinely good life. 10 years from now, assuming average market returns, the second woman is not just a little ahead. She is fundamentally in a different financial universe. Compound interest does not care how aesthetic your city is. It only cares how much you consistently feed it and how early. This is not a lecture about moving to the middle of nowhere and giving up your dreams. This is about understanding that your location is one of the biggest financial decisions you will ever make, and most women never sit down and actually run the numbers before making it. So let's talk about what is actually happening culturally, because there's a shift happening right now among financially aware women, and if you're paying attention online, you have probably already noticed it. There is a quiet migration happening. Women in their late 20s and 30s, especially remote workers and entrepreneurs, are leaving the cities that made them broke and beautiful for cities that let them be both wealthy and well. Places like Raleigh, Nashville, Austin, Charlotte, Tampa, and smaller cities across the Carolinas and the Midwest are seeing an influx of women who want the lifestyle, the aesthetic coffee shops, the boutique gyms, the good restaurants, but without signing away half their income to rent. This is not settling. This is strategy. This is what some women online have started calling being financially attractive, a term that has nothing to do with looks and everything to do with making decisions, including where you live, that position you to actually build wealth instead of just appearing wealthy. Because here is an uncomfortable truth about expensive cities that nobody says directly. A lot of what looks like success in high cost of living areas is actually financed insecurity. The woman with the stunning apartment might be one missed paycheck away from panic. The woman posting the rooftop bar photos might have $400 in savings. Quiet luxury was supposed to be about restraint and taste, but somewhere along the way, a lot of women confused looking financially secure with being financially secure, and cities that demand high spending just to participate in normal life make that confusion incredibly easy to fall into. Let's talk psychology for a moment because this is where it gets interesting. There is a well-documented phenomenon in behavioral economics called lifestyle creep, where your spending rises in proportion to your income, quietly, almost invisibly, until you look up one day and realize a raise you got 2 years ago somehow never turned into savings. Expensive cities accelerate lifestyle creep in a very specific way. When everyone around you is spending at a certain level, your brain recalibrates what feels normal. The $40 brunch does not feel indulgent anymore. It feels standard. The $400 going out fit does not feel excessive. It feels necessary to keep up. This is not a personal failure. This is your brain doing exactly what human brains are wired to do, which is compare yourself to your immediate environment. Researchers sometimes call this social proof spending, and it is one of the most powerful, least discussed forces in personal finance. Now, imagine changing your environment entirely. Not because you are lesser than the women staying in expensive cities, but because you understand that your environment is quietly programming your spending behavior every single day, whether you notice it or not. This is where a soft life gets redefined. A soft life was never supposed to mean broke and exhausted in a beautiful zip code. A soft life was supposed to mean ease,
Peace.
room to breathe. And it is very hard to feel at ease when 60% of your paycheck disappears the moment it lands, and the remaining 40% is fighting to cover groceries that have somehow gotten more expensive every single month for the last several years. If you're interested in the psychology behind money, ambition, relationships, and the quiet decisions shaping women's financial lives, subscribe. This is exactly the kind of conversation we go deeper into here, the ones most people never sit down and actually have. Let's get practical now, because insight without action is just entertainment, and this channel exists to make you smarter, not just soothed. If you are considering where to live with wealth building as a genuine priority, there are a few numbers worth knowing before you sign another lease. First, look at the rent-to-income ratio of any city you are considering. Financial experts generally recommend spending no more than 30% of your gross income on housing. In a lot of major cities, the average is closer to 45 to 50% for single women living alone. That gap is not a small inconvenience. Over 10 years, it is the difference between a six-figure investment portfolio and starting from zero. Second, look beyond rent. Groceries, transportation, insurance, and even something as small as the cost of a gym membership or a haircut can vary dramatically between cities. A skincare routine that costs $60 a month in a smaller city can easily run double in a place where rent for the storefront itself is astronomical, and that cost always trickles down to the customer. Third, and this one matters more than people think, consider state income tax. Several states have no state income tax at all, including Texas, Florida, Nevada, and Tennessee. For a woman earning $80,000 a year, moving from a high-tax state to a no-tax state can mean an extra several $1,000s annually, money that either disappears quietly every year or gets redirected straight into an investment account, depending entirely on where you choose to live. Fourth, think about career mobility, not just cost of living. The ideal city is not always the cheapest one. It is the one where your income potential and your cost of living create the widest possible gap. A city with slightly higher costs but significantly higher salaries in your industry might actually leave you with more disposable income than a cheap city with limited career growth. This is not about running from expensive places. It is about doing the actual math instead of making an emotional decision based on what looks impressive on an Instagram bio. Now, let's bring this back to a real, tender scenario, because financial decisions are never purely rational. They are emotional too, and pretending otherwise does women a disservice. Imagine a woman named the girl who almost stayed. She had built a life in a glamorous, expensive city. Her friends were there. Her favorite coffee shop was there. Her identity, in a lot of ways, was tangled up in that skyline. The thought of leaving felt like failure, like admitting she could not hack it in the big leagues. But late one night, she sat down and actually looked at her numbers. 5 years in that city, and her savings account had barely moved. Not because she was irresponsible, but because the city itself was engineered to keep her spending at the edge of her income, always. She realized, with a mixture of grief and clarity, that staying was not brave. Staying was just familiar. And familiar is not the same thing as good for you. She moved to a smaller, rising city 8 months later. Her rent dropped by nearly half. Within a year, she had built her first real emergency fund. Within 2 years, she had started investing consistently for the first time in her adult life. She still travels back to visit the city she used to live in. She still loves it. But she no longer confuses loving a place with needing to live there in order to feel successful. This is the mindset shift underneath everything we have talked about today. Your city is not your worth. Your zip code is not your value. A rising net worth in a quieter city will outlast a maxed-out credit card in a glamorous one every single time, and the version of you 5 years from now will thank the version of you today for choosing patience and strategy over performance. There is a kind of quiet confidence that comes from watching your savings account grow steadily month after month, even if nobody online ever sees it. There is a kind of freedom that comes from knowing you could handle an emergency without panic. That is the real soft life. Not the version that requires a certain skyline in the background of your videos, but the version that lets you breathe easy because your foundation is actually solid. So, here is the real question worth sitting with tonight. Are you living somewhere because it genuinely serves your future, or because it looks like the kind of place a successful woman is supposed to live? Because the most financially powerful women are not always the ones in the most expensive cities. Sometimes they're the ones quiet enough, wise enough, and secure enough in themselves to choose a life that actually builds something real, even if it never trends. Choose your city like your future depends on it. Because it does.